Pamda mon pays, pamda mon pays, pam du monde, pam d'Afrique. Tu es le soleil, tu es la vie. Woman of my land, woman of the world, African woman, you are the sun, Africa, you are the soul, respect to you. De la ville au village, du pro au champ, de la maison à l'usine, from town to village, from office to field, from house to factories, you are the land, you are the mother, respect to you. My sister, Modja.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is our song for the Her Land, Her Rights campaign. It was composed by Ricky Cash. The name of the song is Her Land, and the images are made by myself and Marco Contishikic.
Of gold, my love makes it grow, and I do it all to fit my own. I am woman, this is my land. We are sisters, me and my land, and our future. It all depends on this connection, me and my land. Raise your voice. It's time you created the space. You have a choice. Allow her to lead the way. Her touches of gold, her love makes it grow, and she'll do it all to fit her own. I am woman. This is my land. We are sisters. Me and my land. And our future. It all depends on this connection. Me and my land. Hey, hey, oh. Hey, hey, oh.
Thank you so much.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you. So you have actually just been witness to the world premiere of our theme song, Her Land, and that was played by the incredible musicians Baaba Maal, Modja, and Ricky Cash. So my name is Laquesta Burak. I currently work with BBC News. I've also worked with Sky News, and I've worked on the African continent and in the Middle East as well. And I am deeply honoured to be taking part in this event. I'll be moderating you through the coming hours. The event, of course, is Her Land, Her Rights. And what we're trying to do today, rather than just talk, is we're trying to find out solutions to advance gender equality and land restoration goals. So we're gathered in the majesty of this beautiful, beautiful General Assembly Hall. This is, of course, the United Nations headquarters. And today we're also marking Desertification and Drought Day. This is no longer just an African problem. Drought and desertification has moved north. So this matters to everybody. Today, I hope we'll be putting the issue of her land, her rights high on the global agenda. Why? Because when I was asked to take part in this event, I knew why straight away, and I'll tell you why. When we are trained at the BBC in subjects such as climate change, we have to know the key terms, who we're talking to, why we're talking to them. And one of the main issues they said, it has been recognized that climate change cannot be fought without bringing women on board. So that's why I'm here. I am deeply, deeply passionate about it. And women have to be brought on board along with their rights, equal rights, to their land, not to be passed on. Their land, their rights. They work the land, they nurture the land, and that land nurtures their families. They are entwined with it. That's why we're here. That's why we are going to be pushing this particular issue. So, once again, I wonder if I could just ask you to put your hands together, please, for our fantastic musicians today. And they're not just musicians. They have this year been awarded the accreditation of the UNCCD Goodwill Ambassadors. Why? This is one of my favorite questions in my industry. I have never seen, and I've worked with this team of ambassadors last year in Ivory Coast at the COP. I have never seen so much enthusiasm. I have never seen so much drive. Part of the reason why we are gathered here today is because what they came up with whilst they were sitting round tables, conversations, speaking to champions when it came to gender equality. So we owe it to them that they have pushed the mandate on women's rights when it comes to land and climate change. They are doing fantastic work. So let us crack on. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, it is my great honor and pleasure to invite the President of the 77th session of the General Assembly, His Excellency, Mr. Csaba Kőrösi, to deliver his opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Deputy Secretary General, Mr. Executive Secretary, Madam Executive Director, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to participate in today's high-level event. We derive much of our identity, culture, and traditions from our connections to land. From my mother's side, my ancestors have been farmers for centuries. That means they knew the values land offered. They respected and used the forces of nature. I learned a lot of them. Land degradation is a threat not only to our food security, livelihoods, ecosystems, and biodiversity, but to our existence as a whole. Land degradation wipes out the wisdom that has lived beneath us for millennia and with it, our hope for the future. Indeed, as aptly called by the South African writer Nadine Gordimer, the desert is a place without expectation. 29 years ago, this body proclaimed 17th June as the day to combat desertification and drought. Ever since, the GA has been tackling these challenges through the deeply intertwined issues of resilience and land restoration. It has been a long struggle, and we have all understood that, to quote James Lovelock, sadly, it is much easier to create a desert than a forest. Today we cast our focus on two topics that matters to us all: land and women's equal right to own, manage, or inherit it. Throughout my presidency, I have strongly advocated for better integration of science and policy. This is especially important for planning how to tackle the climate shocks that erode our global landscape. So, what does science say about the intersection of land rights, gender empowerment, and justice? The data could not be clearer. When women farmers have access to own land, they grow more, and so do their children and nations. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization finds that with women's equal access to resources, including land, agriculture yields could rise by almost a third, resulting in potentially 150 million fewer hungry people in the world. Empirical research proves that strengthening women's land and property rights increases food security and reduces malnourishment. In addition, when we include women equally in land management and tap their traditional knowledge to promote sustainable land use, we not only reverse desertification, but also promote land restoration practices. Together, these positive shifts in women's empowerment have a ripple effect on income and children's welfare. So we have the evidence to support why it is advantageous to increase women's land tenure. What we are lacking are the policy decisions and investments that should not only target women's individual rights, but also recognize their role in collectively managing land. In this field, too, we should do our best to remove the barriers to women's participation in decision-making. The 2030 Agenda recognizes that gender equal access to land rights is integral to the achievement of all our global goals of sustainable development, all 17 goals, from achieving gender equality to ending poverty and hunger and to sustaining life on land. This understanding of integrated nature of both crises and solutions must have pride of place at the SDG Summit in September. As we mark this Desertification and Drought Day, I urge you to recognize women's contribution to the sustainable management of land and the broader achievement of our 2030 Agenda. And I call upon you to promote laws and policies that give us a fighting chance at leaving no one behind. We cannot let this foundation promise dry out. Thank you.
Your Excellency Kőrösi, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. It's all about policies and investment, isn't it? And it's not just about her, it's about all of us. So we'll now move on and hear a message from the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres.
We depend on land for our survival, yet we treat it like dirt. Unsustainable farming is eroding soil 100 times faster than natural process can restore them. And up to 40% of our planet's land is now degraded, imperiling food production, threatening biodiversity, and compounding the climate crisis. This hits women and girls the hardest. They suffer disproportionately from the lack of food, water scarcity, and forced migration that result from our mistreatment of land. Yet, they have the least control. In many countries, laws and practices block women and girls from owning land. But where they do, they restore and protect it, increasing productivity, building resilience to drought, and investing in health, education, and nutrition. Equal land rights both protect land and advance gender equality. That is why this Desertification and Drought Day puts the focus on her land, her rights. I urge all governments to eliminate legal barriers to women owning land and to involve them in policy making. Support women and girls to play their part in protecting our most precious resource, and together, let's stop land degradation by 2030. Thank you.
Excellency, thank you very much. Now, we're incredibly honoured today. We've been joined by some amazing women who are doing incredible work behind the scenes, leaders from around the world who haven't just sat back once they've stepped away from that huge seat of power. One of those women is with us today. Her Excellency, Tarja Halonen. In the year 2000, she became Finland's first female president. No mean feat, I tell you. And since stepping back from the sharp end of politics and her illustrious career, President Halonen hasn't stopped at all. She continues engagement as a champion of gender equality and environmental rights. She is a serving UNCCD land ambassador. She was part of that team who made it possible for us to be here today. And she does it all with a truly fantastic, wicked sense of humour. I have witnessed it. And when she's talking gender, she puts the men on the spot in the cleverest of ways. So it's been an absolute masterclass in leadership. It's my immense honour to invite Her Excellency, Tarja Halonen, to deliver her remarks.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Around the world, over 3 billion people are impacted by accelerating land degradation and intensifying droughts. Women and girls, of course, they are again disproportionately affected, and their contribution to health over the land is often even uncompensated. Gender inequality in land ownership and discriminatory practices expose women to poverty, hunger, sexual and gender-based violence, and many other negative things. Women and girls in vulnerable situations, including those with disabilities, indigenous women and girls, and female human rights defenders, face even higher risks. Yet, when women full and equal rights and participation in decision-making are ensured, they become crucial, powerful actors in protecting and restoring the land. Achieving land degradation neutrality requires everyone's efforts, ours, and women and girls are half of the world's population. Empowering women and girls is one of the most impactful things that we can do to achieve environmental sustainability and the health of the land. Today, we call for transformative shift. Legal barriers to women and girls' land ownership must be eliminated. Women must have the opportunity to participate in land management, conservation, and restoration. Women must have access to finance so that they can invest in technological inputs needed to improve land. So we are very realistic. Changes take time before become a reality, but we need to start now. Here I would like to highlight also the importance of education and training rural women in agriculture and forestry, both at the national and international level. So I ask you, let's do justice for women and girls, and we all will benefit that. Thank you that you are here today.
President Halonan, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. We move on now to another first, another woman breaking the glass ceiling. Her Excellency, Sarah Kugongwela Amatila, is the first woman president, or rather Prime Minister, I apologize, Prime Minister of her country, and that is Namibia. It is my honor to invite Her Excellency to deliver her remarks.
Thank you very much, Madam Director of Proceedings, Your Excellency, President of the United Nations General Assembly, Your Excellency, Deputy Secretary General, Your Excellency, former President of Finland, Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. On the occasion of Desertification and Drought Day, Namibia extends its warm appreciation to the UNCCD Executive Secretary, Mr. Ibrahim Thiaw, and your entire team for your outstanding dedication to shining the spotlight on and actively promoting the important mandate of this crucial convention to combat desertification and drought. As co-chair of the Group of Friends on DLDD matters, Namibia is pleased to be associated with and to participate in today's high-level event. I am particularly pleased that the focus of our meeting today is on championing policies and actions needed to support women and girls' contributions to sustainable land management and mobilizing support to advance land rights for women and girls around the globe. Excellencies, today we are reminded of the centrality of productive land to the compounding challenges brought by the food, water, energy, and environmental health nexus, which is at the heart of our Sustainable Development Agenda. Namibia ratified the UNCCD in 1997 and has been actively implementing the convention through its Ministry of Environment, Forestry, and Tourism. In line with SDG 15 and coupled with our endeavors to prioritize gender mainstreaming in our national priorities, particularly in addressing drought as a recurrent challenge faced in Namibia, we have also extrapolated these initiatives to our engagements at an international level. This is primarily because we recognize the importance of gender mainstreaming in climate action and disaster risk reduction to ensure inclusivity and social justice. This is further espoused by our commitment to reduce the rate of biodiversity loss and halt habitat degradation outside protected areas through national biodiversity strategies and action plans. These plans include integrated land use planning and restoration of degraded ecosystems to maintain important biodiversity areas and ecosystem services. Mr. President, pursuant to the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, Decision 23 COP11 taken during COP11 in Windhoek, Namibia in 2013 on combating desertification, Namibia has made significant progress in achieving its land degradation neutrality targets by targeting restoration actions in 7 land degradation hotspots. Strengthening these targets and developing a land use planning framework strongly supported by integrating LDN into land management policies is part of Namibia's long-term strategy for LDN implementation. However, Namibia, like many developing countries, requires substantial financial and technical support to enhance its LDN targets and implement integrated land use planning frameworks at the national level. These efforts aim to restore degraded lands and ecosystems, mitigate climate change impacts, ensure food security, diversify income, and conserve biodiversity. Importantly, these initiatives are carried out inclusively, recognizing the significant role of women and children in household and small to medium-scale enterprises. Mr. President, Namibia demonstrates a strong commitment to promoting gender equality and empowering women. The country has a dedicated ministry responsible for gender equality, child welfare, and poverty eradication, emphasizing the importance of uplifting women and recognizing them as agents of change. Gender equality in land rights has been prioritized since Namibia's independence in 1990. During the National Land Conference in 1991, the importance of gender equality in land rights intensified, with a focus on granting women equal access to land use titles, inheritance rights, and land ownership, given that women constitute the most agricultural producers in communal areas. This recognition of women's rights not only improves livelihoods and food security, but also restores their dignity. Namibia recognizes women's role as custodians of traditional knowledge and active users of land resources, making the restoration of their land rights crucial for land restoration efforts. Our country ensures that gender considerations are integrated into projects at all levels, promoting inclusivity and gender equality throughout implementation. Capacity buildings and skills development at the community level have empowered women, enabling them to have a greater voice in natural resource management and leadership positions. A concrete example of creating an enabling environment for women to thrive is the Shack Dwellers Federation of Namibia, a network of community-led savings group, mainly comprising women who work together to incrementally secure affordable land, shelter, and infrastructure services for low-income urban households across all regions of Namibia. At every stage, this process is community-driven. This community participatory approach complements the work of government to provide access to land and housing, especially for women. Namibia continues to implement decisions of both the UNCCD and the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change on Land Degradation and Drought. This includes prioritizing UNCCD Decision 24/COP15, adopted in Abidjan in 2022, which addresses intersectionality in policies on desertification, land degradation, and drought. Discussions on gender mainstreaming from Decision 23/COP11, adopted in Windhoek in 2013, along with UNFCCC COP18, COP20, and COP23, all emphasize gender considerations in climate policies, activities, financing, and technology. However, Namibia acknowledges that limited access to resources, including land, labor, information, and technology, hinders women's adoption of sustainable farming practices. Gender mainstreaming is seen as essential for inclusive climate action and disaster risk reduction, as gender-neutral interventions can perpetuate inequalities and limit women's access to resources and opportunities. Excellencies, in response to the challenges brought about by desertification and prolonged drought, it is crucial for parties involved in the UNCCD to engage in ongoing discussions and explore effective policies, advocacy measures, and implementation strategies at all levels to address drought and mitigate the impact of desertification. This should be done within a comprehensive approach to disaster risk reduction and the promotion of community ecosystem resilience. It is important to consider the specific impact of drought on women and their livelihoods. Namibia remains committed to supporting like-minded parties in collaborating with the UNCCD Secretariat to identify tools to enhance the resilience of communities and ecosystems. Finally, Namibia urges policymakers to go beyond immediate food needs and rather prioritize the empowerment of women and focus on long-term solutions for food shortages and enhancing national preparedness. In the spirit of partnership, we have the ability to do more to strengthen our efforts to achieve the intertwined global goals of land neutrality and gender equality, which can contribute to the attainment of several other sustainable development goals. I thank you.
Your Excellency Amathila, thank you very much indeed. It seems to me that Namibia is leading the way not only in fighting land degradation, I didn't know so much was being done, an absolute case study, but also gender rights, women's rights since 1991 is what I picked up. So this work is long-term. It does kind of make sense, doesn't it, why royalty and celebrities, Hollywood celebs, are heading to Namibia. The work is being put in. Now, unfortunately, we were hoping to be joined today by another female head of state, but Her Excellency Katrín Jakobsdóttir, who is the Prime Minister of Iceland, is busy helping her country celebrate its National Day. However, she has sent us this message.
Excellencies, it gives me great pleasure to participate in this timely event on a pressing topic. Tomorrow, June 17th, is both the World Day to combat desertification and drought, as well as the National Independence Day of Iceland. Gender equality is a top priority for Iceland and is a key to a good society as far as we see it. And the same will apply to combating land degradation. This is a major challenge, but we firmly believe that keeping gender equality in mind will increase success. In one version of the Icelandic Book of Settlement, called Landnámabók in Icelandic, composed around 1300, is a passage where it says that when the land was almost fully settled, limits had to be set as to how much land the newcomers could claim. When it came to man, the limit was how much he could cover running with a torch, whereas a woman could claim as much land as she could lead a cow through for the same amount of time. Obviously, the idea here, where this passage describes actual practice in the 10th century, is different rules for different genders, but such discriminatory laws and practices need to be abolished. For example, it is unacceptable that women are still being denied the right to inherit their husband's property in over 100 countries. Similarly, the fact that women globally spend 200 million hours every day collecting water is thought-provoking. Would it not be better use of these women's time to own the land and have the resources to work it? It's our firm belief that gender equality will increase the probability of success in combating major global challenges, such as reaching land degradation neutrality and ultimately in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. This is firmly kept in mind at the GROW Land Restoration Training Program hosted in Iceland under the auspices of UNESCO. The topic of gender and land tenure is specifically addressed within this program, which assists low and middle-income countries to combat land degradation, promote sustainable land management, and restore degraded land through targeted capacity building. Gender equality is an integral part of the program's mission. I thank you for your attention and wish you a fruitful discussion today.
Your Excellency, thank you very much. That's the Prime Minister of Iceland. And I wonder How many of our delegates sitting here are one of those more than 100 that the Prime Minister mentioned? There's something to take away with. And what would you like to see for your sister, your daughter, your granddaughter to come? There's a thought. Now, last year, Desertification and Drought Day was actually hosted by Spain. And Her Excellency, Teresa Ribera Rodriguez, serves as the country's Vice President and also the Minister for Ecological Transition and Demographic Change. And she has sent us a message to mark today.
Happy Day Against Desertification. This year, the UN has proposed that we focus on women, their land, and how we can ensure that restoration of something so important for everyone is the quality of soil and fighting erosion and desertification. But with a special emphasis on the need to strengthen gender policies that make it possible for women to actually exercise their rights in full. There's a lot of advantages here, and it overcomes a lot of inequalities, many components of inequity. The data don't lie. It's very likely that in many of our countries, the ability to work in the field is mainly something done by women. And as extreme episodes related to climate change and the loss of soil quality due to erosion and the use of chemicals has led to an additional burden on women's shoulders. It creates an additional burden in many cases, and that includes the need to carry water or the need to work more for a lower yield, which means a loss of quality in our soil. What's more, at a time when we are talking about climate-related migration, we can see how this field is becoming even more feminized, how the risk of losing harvests creates a bigger impact in women, and how the lack of recognition makes it more difficult to pass on traditional arts and cultural guidelines that make it possible to better manage, how the lack of women's ability to register land under their name, which is quite common in many countries even today, creates additional inequalities throughout women's lives and even later on in the lives of their daughters. That is why working on integrating in a much more reasonable, equitable, visible way to focus on women in preserving soil and activities under the aegis of what we can describe as economic and solutions that are based on nature in order to maintain fertile territory is so important. This is something that we also recognize in Spain. We are one of the countries which in many, like in other areas with transition climates, where we face the threat of desertification. Much of our national territory is a result of various activities which are man-made, such as the use of chemicals, but also the loss of that connection due to climate change has reduced soil quality, fertility, and has led to new challenges in public and private management. That is why we know that managing droughts during the drought season is something we need to focus on. But as a result of climate change, we also need to strengthen our own capacities and ability to anticipate these events. We need more sophisticated responses and to be better prepared during the entire year. As we face wildfires, longer drought seasons each year. This is related to extreme drought and longer lasting drought, which goes hand in hand with flooding that immediately follows, with a risk of further eroding our fertile soil. We'd like to dedicate a lot of effort to fighting desertification. We have done this last year with the passing of our national strategy for fighting desertification in Spain. We've done this hand in hand with Senegal and other countries with an initiative to fight drought and desertification, which is under the Convention on the Fight Against Desertification. There are 32 countries that are taking part, and we'd like to be more. We want it to be everyone. No one is spared the risk of the loss of soil quality as a result of desertification, and no one is spared the need to support and improve improve their capacities. That is why we need to continue working. We need to integrate the gender perspective, and we need to recognize women's rights and increase their visibility, and the important role that they carry out in this territory deserves visibility as well. We want to dedicate today, alongside the United Nations, to women, their land, their rights, and the need to restore the quality of our soil. Thank you.
Thank you to Her Excellency Ribera Rodriguez of Spain. Thank you very much indeed. So a lot of underscoring the importance of women in building drought resilience in a nation. Now, back in 2021, the United States, the government here, launched its first national strategy on gender equality and gender equity as well. It's also very actively engaged in the UNCCD. It is a collaborative party in the work that is done. So on that note, I would like to invite Ms. Jennifer Littlejohn, who is the Acting Assistant Secretary for the Bureau of Oceans and International Environmental and Scientific Affairs, to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, Mr. President of the General Assembly, Madam Deputy Secretary General, and thank you to the UN for organizing this essential event. It is entirely fitting that we gather here on UN Drought and Desertification Day to highlight the importance of land rights for women, for the denial of these rights puts the world at greater risk. As the Secretary General has observed, we must work to eliminate long-standing disparities in the agricultural, environmental, and legal systems by eliminating discrimination and structural barriers that hamper women's land rights and leadership in sustainable land management. Women hold a vital stake in the health of the land, yet often don't control over it. Around the world, women are less likely to own or control land than men, leaving them more vulnerable to poverty, hunger, gender-based violence, and displacement, all of which limit their ability to thrive and prosper. President Biden has recognized the need to change this dynamic, promote gender equity and equality, and empower women and girls to decrease land degradation, build resilience to drought, and also address the climate crisis. In 2021, the administration released the first ever national strategy on gender equity and equality, which recognizes the critical role of women and girls as leaders in mitigating and adapting to climate change, and identifies promoting gender equity in mitigating and responding to climate change as one of the 10 interconnected strategic priorities. This means pressing for stronger land rights for women, including Indigenous women. Their stewardship of land through inclusion in individual or collective ownership is indispensable to combating land degradation and desertification, increasing land restoration, and building drought resilience. The effort to advance the rights and opportunities for women and girls worldwide is not just a job for diplomats. The President has tasked the entire U.S. government through our defense, diplomacy, foreign aid, and trade efforts to incorporate this into our work as a priority. As President Biden has noted, promoting gender equity and equality is a strategic imperative that will advance prosperity, stability, and security globally in the years to come. This applies to women's land rights. And the United States is committed to standing with women in all of their diversity and joining with all of you to make this happen and to make this vision a reality. Thank you.
Madam Acting Assistant Secretary, thank you very much. So clearly, when land is at risk, populations are at risk. We heard about geopolitical strategy there. People are on the move, and there are various motivations for why governments do what they do, but often It goes back to what is happening to and on their land. Now, in parts of the world, Indigenous women and girls are living on the front lines of desertification and degradation as well. We've heard that throughout since we started this event, and drought. And often it is women and it is girls who are impacted first and also the hardest. So to tell us a little bit more about this aspect of our day today, I'd like to invite Ms. Hindu Umaru Ibrahim, who is the president of the Association of Indigenous Women and People of Chad.
Hi everyone, and thank you for the invitation by the UNCCD. Let me start by being a little bit provocative in the title of our event today. Her land, her rights. I cannot agree more, but I also disagree. Behind the title, there is a concept that women are the key player to combat desertifications and also fight climate change. And it is true. Fighting desertification without women is like playing football without your goalkeeper. You cannot win the match. But at the same time, there is also a misunderstanding that even here at the UN, where we are talking among friends, we have to make a lot of progress. Because it has never been her land. It is our land. From an indigenous people's perspective, we cannot own the land individually. In fact, we don't even own the land owns us. And it is very important to change our perspective. If we want to win the battle and to learn from indigenous peoples who have a unique way to deal with the land issue based in our collective land rights. Based on these visions, to change our perspective, I think indigenous peoples have a lot to let the world learn from our wisdom. We are leading it by using techniques, rules, principles in order to leave the land not only for us healthy, but for the next generation too. And in these visions, we know who is passing it to the next generations is the woman, and collectively we are doing it. So friends, in my region in the Sahel, it is not a good host anymore. You have seen the maps of climate and read the reports. You have watched how the temperature curve are hitting the record everywhere. In a couple of years, our homeland, which has to live and who have a lot of perspective and productive land, will be a very dangerous place for our next generations. Because we all know, with the intensity of the heat, with the rain, that will become unpredictable. And with all the land and water, who are essential for our life and for this convention to combat desertifications. For the first time in my life, I became desperate. Desperate because witnessing this climate change acceleration, I come to realize that the youngest boys and girls in my communities, back in Chad, of course, around the Sahel regions, it could be not possible for them anymore to leave home. They will be forced to leave their homeland, their lands. Not because they would run away from the war, not because they want to look a better future and bright one in the cities. No, because for the first time, I come to imagine that our land might be dead in the course of the next decade. Yes, you hear me, dead. Despite our innovation, despite the determination of the women of my community to preserve ecosystem, to block the desertification, despite our collective effort to save and share water, our land is dying. And on the dead land, there is no rights. Not for her, not for him, not even for us. But of course, in the desperate, in the heart of the woman, in my community, there is still hope. And we must give a chance for this hope. We need to open our arm to those actions, to Farimatu, who is planting the trees around the reserve of Senaura, to Aisatu, who grow in Gurnoita, and who know from her great-grandmother the seed of Bokki, who can help her family to be resilient, to Hawau around Lake Chad, who tell her doctor in a most drought season where she can get fresh water. So opening our arm maybe is not enough. So we will not defeat drought, climate change, and desertification only with the word and commitments. No, we will beat it if all the great women, men in this room, who as the CEO, the ministers, the presidents, philanthropic, who all lead the international institutions, live here this evening with a homework by the COP28. You must come with at least hundreds of projects, each led by the women on the ground. At the COP15 of climate change and biodiversity, COP26, all those COPs, indigenous peoples noted the commitments, and we did our homework with my brothers and sisters around the world. We developed projects, we organized ourselves. We are the first rank of the climate army. We are the goalkeepers that blocked the last attempt of desertification and climate change to win the match. Since then, in my communities, leaders give multiple pieces of land to a collective woman to manage it and to get access to the land rights. And now, it is time for all of you to support them, to support us, to stop plaguing, to start putting the real cash in the table to help us to win the most important battle of our life. I thank you.
Mr. Ibrahim, thank you very much. Thank you. So we move from a provocative statement, our land is dying, we end with a rallying call, there is hope, and we move now on to two formidable women and a call to action. The first, I like to describe as the real boss lady of the house. This young lady has described herself as sweet but strong. I'm told she's also a demon on the scooter. She loves water. She's working on her swimming lessons. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce to you possibly one of the youngest recruits of the UN and the UNCCD. Please welcome to the stage Valentina, age 3, and her mother, UNCCD Goodwill Ambassador Modja.
Her land. Warm with the light of early dawn beneath her feet, she toils. Generations of soil, cherished. For her land she provides, and in return she's provided for, nourished, intertwined. A tapestry old as time. The earth needs her as she needs it, and yet, thread by thread it unwinds. Her land falls behind, tired, scarce, degraded. Vulnerable, women and girls, their rights we must tirelessly champion. We can no longer stand in silence, because silence stands for no one. Our voices will rise like the sun after a harsh winter. We will mend what has been broken together. Her land is her right, because her land is her life.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this is Valentina. Women and girls around the world are facing worsening droughts, raging wildfires, and devastating floods and famines. What happens to our planet, our land, our climate impacts them first and most. And yet, they know best how to protect and restore the land. They cannot do so, though given they have minimal control over land itself or decision about how to manage it. But it doesn't have to be this way. When land rights are secured, we have seen women and girls increase yields, restore lands, and build resilience to drought. Women also invest more in nutrition, health, and education, and this benefits their family, communities, and wider societies. That's why today, women leaders gathered here in New York and around the world are calling for a step change in women's role in managing our land. We call upon governments to eliminate legal barriers to women and girls' land ownership, ensure women can inherit land, and promote their participation in land management, conservation, and restoration. We call upon the private sector and financial institutions to unleash more access to finance so women can invest in the technological inputs they need to improve land. Your turn. And we ask the public to join us by standing with women and girls around the world in their pursuit of equal and full rights to land. Her land, her rights. Valentina, do you have something to say? Yes. She's 3 years old, and last time that I was here at the UN, I hadn't had her yet, and my vision has completely changed. I was already aware of all the efforts that we should do for women and girls, but this is the future. We have to do something for our generation, the present, and for the future. Thank you.
Could I just add that last night we heard all the rallying cries from Valentina. She was a bundle of energy. Now I know that that clap was not to overwhelm her. It is not coming, it's not easy coming on stage, age 3. Doesn't matter who your mum is. Could I please have a proper round of applause, please? So that call of action is going to be accessible to the public, and I just know you're all going to carry this message forward, because the more signatures, the more people, the more politicians, the more people in power actually start to be faced with those signatures on a piece of paper, the more they feel they have to be seen to be doing something. And it doesn't matter if it makes them look good, the fact is that action will be taken. So please go out and spread the word. Okay. Time now to hear from our UNDP Secretary General. Sorry, I was overwhelmed by Valentina. She is going to speak for us before we start our first panel session. We'll be getting some furniture on the stage as this happens, but first off, please, a round of applause for the remarks that are being delivered by the Deputy Secretary General, Ms. Amina Mohammed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The President of the General Assembly, Mr. Csaba Kőrösi, former President of Finland, and our UNCCD Land Ambassador, the Prime Minister of Namibia, the Executive Secretary Ibrahim Thiaw of UNCCD, my sister Nassima Sami Bahous, the Executive Director of UN Women, and our UNCCD Goodwill Ambassadors, Mr. Baaba Maal, Ms. Inna Modja, and Mr. Ricky Kesh. Your voice, your passion, the influence that you bring are so needed in the world today, and we thank you for being with us this morning. Of course, our SDG advocate, Indu Ibrahim, thank you for your leadership and your provocation. It has never stopped since you became our advocate. Excellencies, friends, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank the inspiring women who have spoken with great passion on the truth and issues that impact us all, her land, her rights, and I believe the provocation there was that how do we balance going from he to we. All these issues are fundamental to the promise of the 2030 Agenda, our Sustainable Development Goals, from gender equality to inclusive livelihoods and land sustainability. My thanks to the Secretariat of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification for organizing this really powerful event, and the leadership of my brother Ibrahim Thiaw, which has always been inspiring. On this Desertification and Drought Day, our message is simple. We must finally recognize and value women as owners, managers of our lands and our resources, and we must invest in the fight against climate change. Women make up the majority of rural farmers, but less than 15% of agricultural landholders are women, and their right to inherit property continues to be denied under customary and traditional laws in over 100 countries. As an African woman from a nomadic family, the Fulani people, I'm also saddened to see that our nomadic population of women are so invisible, yet provide for the livestock and the age-old traditions of living in harmony with our environment. But today, this needs to be recognized and addressed in the era of climate crisis. This critically undermines both our efforts to advance gender equality and our transition from degradation to restoration. We need to take action to break down the structural impediments, the data to see and leave no one behind, to tackle chronic insecurity, and end discriminatory social injustices. Friends, this is a matter of moral justice, and it is a matter of economic interest. When we champion regenerative agriculture, support the development of local communities, and respect the interface between working landscapes and natural ecosystems, we all benefit. Across the globe, nearly 1/3 of women's employment is in agriculture, with 608 million family farms producing around 80% of our world's food. Women are known for producing high-value niche products like baobab, shea, moringa. Indigenous women have been champions of sustainable land management for millennia and are today in the vanguard of innovative solutions to conservation. When women have the means to invest in their land, the benefits are broad, they are deep, and many, from increased incomes to enhanced family well-being to improved sustainability of soil, water, and biodiversity. And this is why securing women's right to decent work, access to credit, training, markets, and new technologies and services are such critical elements in gender-responsive approaches to support land restoration. It is why we must scale these approaches with multiple partners and across multiple geographies. We're already seeing progress from Nicaragua to Rwanda and beyond, but we must go further still. In some instances, shifting gender norms will require context-specific measures, including dialogues, raising awareness, increasing representation of women in land boards that oversee land rights. Elsewhere, demonstrating the value of redesigning financial products, instruments around women's needs, specifically in land-based value chains, will be critical to facilitate women's access to loans and to credit. Friends, together we can advance our common goals on gender and restoration at speed, but also at scale. These priorities are high on the global agenda and will feature prominently in discussions at the UN Food Systems Summit in July in Rome, and in the upcoming SDG Summit in September in these halls. There are also ongoing efforts to pivot UN capacities to place women and girls at the center of its operations and to help countries to deliver on gender equality and the Sustainable Development Goals. The transitions identified for our SDG Summit will target gender-responsive approaches across all of the high-impact initiatives that we will propose and ensure continuity through 2023 into COP28 and building to the Summit of the Future in 2024, as well as the World Social Summit in 2025. And we will include, in particular, investments in the transitions for food systems, for digital connectivity, for energy transitions, education and skills, our social protection floors, and of course the triple crisis that addresses climate, biodiversity, and pollution. These global milestones, strategic opportunities, are to make meaningful progress on the land tenure restoration nexus in a gender-responsive manner. I invite all of you to participate in the SDG Summit, and I count on your leadership at home and in the lead-up to this decisive summit to advance gender equality and land restoration goals, which would accelerate the progress across all of the Sustainable Development Goals. Together, let us walk the talk, let us restore the land, let us build resilience and secure a more equitable future for Valentina and for all of us. I thank you.
Madam Deputy Secretary General, thank you very much indeed, and I appreciate that we have overrun slightly, and the Deputy Secretary has to leave us, but whilst we get ready for the panel, we are going to invite you to watch some videos of some stories. Basically, they are stories of women, they are girls and land, and our panel section will be getting underway within the next minute and a half. Thank you very much.
In the vast deserts of Ordos City, Inner Mongolia, China, a woman named Yin Yuzhen sows the seeds of change. Braving sandstorm, she's turned a desert into an oasis, controlling over 4,000 hectares of shifting dunes. Her resilience and actions inspire, leading hundreds of households to plant over 200 hectares of trees, fostering work, equality, and a sustainable future. Awarded and globally recognized, Yin Yuzhen's work is a beacon, shining light on our ability to heal our world.
Okay, we're going to start our panel discussion now, and we have two. We were hoping to hear slightly more from our guests on the stage today, but we're going to try and compress it, but be as succinct as we can in the responses so that we are then able to hear from members from the floor as well. That's the plan. So let's kick off our first panel discussion. And we are talking about policy. So I'd like to invite to the stage, please, Dr. Solange Bondiaki-Badji, who is the President for the Rights and Resources Group. Also joining us today is Dr. Anneliese Bloem, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Water and Science from the Department of the Interior for the United States Government. And finally, Ms. Seema Sami Bahous, Executive Director of UN Women. Now, also joining us remotely, they couldn't join us today remotely, but in the form of a recorded message, is Their Excellency, Ms. Sonia Guajajara, who is the Minister of Indigenous Peoples for Brazil, and also Mr. Ku Dongyu, who is the Director General of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. So let us first start off, please. You may need your headphones for this particular message from Her Excellency, Minister Guajajara.
Hello, I am Sonia Guajajara.
Para mim é uma grande alegria participar desta mesa, mesmo nesse curto espaço de tempo, É uma mesa muito relevante porque trata de...
But it's a very relevant panel about the policies to promote women's rights over land. We are living a historic moment, a significant time where women are occupying different spaces in society, in the labor force, and in politics. It's the first time that Brazil has a Ministry of Indigenous Peoples, and this ministry is occupied by a woman minister. We have women legislators, and together we are working to ensure our right to land, which is a constitutional right, but we still have much land that still has to be recognized. The largest biodiversity in the planet is protected by indigenous peoples, and we indigenous women who are most appropriate to protect those lands, because land to us is mother, is sacred, and it ensures our food security and our culture. In Brazil, this year, we are going to go on the 3rd March of Indigenous Peoples under the central theme of protecting biodiversity and our ancestral roots, and to give women the opportunity to participate in this March of Indigenous Women, which will take place in early September. We are also putting together a project called Modja Women, in partnership with the Ministry of Women here in Brazil, so that we may map violence against indigenous women. It is also a project that will protect women from that violence and the violation of rights. We have 6 women in the House Chamber of Ethics who are being penalized and judged because they are fighting against a bill 490, which goes against indigenous peoples and environmental rights. We need to fight this situation here, and we need everyone's support to say no to this political violence against women. Together, we will be able to strengthen our right to land, climate balance in the entire world. And that's why we are here together in this against this attempt to remove our rights over land, which ensures our existence and our livelihoods. We are together.
Of Indigenous Peoples, Her Excellency Sonia Guajajara. So I'd like to begin our discussion on the policies that are needed to advance equity and equality when it comes to women's access and land rights. So first off, we'll begin with Deputy Assistant Secretary Bloom. Obviously, this is an issue that the United States takes very seriously. Why and how are you going to achieve the aim of arresting land degradation and arresting the devastating impacts of drought?
Thanks so much. First, I'd like to thank UNCCD, UN Women, the FAO, and OCHCR for putting on this event. I'm so pleased to be here today with this distinguished group to bring attention to and galvanize action on an important issue. And also, I'd like to congratulate my fellow panelists for all that you do and have done to increase women's land rights. Now, to answer your question, globally, women and girls are often responsible for managing household energy and water resources, so it is not surprising that they are on the front lines of the most pressing and interconnected environmental challenges we face, like land degradation, drought, and climate change. Despite this responsibility for managing household resources, women have limited access to and control over environmental goods and services, and are often absent from decision-making bodies and processes that impact them and their communities. Land rights is no exception. Women hold a vital stake in the health of the land, yet often don't have control over it. The good news is that women and girls are uniquely poised to develop locally relevant and thus more effective interventions reflective of the entire population. Overall, evidence shows that empowering women politically, economically, and socially, and including their needs and perspectives in decision-making, leads to more equitable and sustainable policies. When given the opportunity, women invest more in nutrition, health, and education, which creates a ripple effect that benefits their families, communities, and society more broadly. Ultimately, whether we're talking about the climate crisis, land degradation, or other crucial environmental issues we face, we need an all hands on deck to successfully tackle these challenges. So why would we leave any solutions, particularly win-win solutions like promoting gender equality and women's empowerment, on the table? Let me conclude by highlighting the importance of addressing gender inequality, drought, and land degradation holistically, and this panel is taking an important step doing so. Our efforts to tackle all of these challenges will be substantially more effective if we recognize that they are inextricably interlinked. So it's not only the right thing to do, it's the strategic thing to do. Let's get to work.
Okay, Madam Acting Assistant Secretary, thank you very much. Dr. Bloom, thank you. Ms. Seema, who's also joining us here, Executive Director of UN Women. Now, if you don't know what UN Women focus on, well, they're dedicated to gender equality and also the empowerment of women and girls. So, from that mandate, where and how do women's land rights fit into the broader gender equality schedule, agenda, and how do you take it forward? Because it's very easy to just talk about it, but how do you actually make a change?
Thank you very much. Let me first say that I really commend the UNCCD for the focus this year. So let me first start by commending UNCCD for the focus of this year's Desertification and Drought Day on Her Land, Her Rights. This is a campaign that is much needed at this time of pushback against women's rights, on also backsliding on women's rights, and also as we approach the midpoint moment of the SDGs, and especially looking at SDG 5 and how much we really need to accelerate the work that we are doing to ensure that gender equality goals are achieved and that also women are at the center of all the SDGs, of course, including SDG 5, but that also we see as SDG 5 as the linchpin for all SDGs to be achieved. So unless women are empowered, unless discrimination against women is eradicated, not much we can do on the other SDGs, because it is important, as was mentioned earlier this morning, that that women form half the population of the world. And unless they are empowered, unless we remove discrimination against them, it will be difficult to see that we progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. I also want to say that this particular campaign today, Her Land, Her Rights, is crucial for the implementation of the global and national commitments on, in particular, women's access to land and their control over it. And it is also crucial for the implementation of the Convention to combat desertification. For many people around the world, land represents power and identity, as we also heard this morning. So women's control over land is therefore fundamental to the achievement of gender equality and also to economic independence of women. Making this change, along with change in the accompanying powerful social norms and discriminatory practices, is integral, as I said, to achieving the Sustainable Development Goal. Really, we must break down barriers to women's rights to land, and we must break barriers to women's decisions on land and participation in policies that happen with regards to that. Land rights and tenure security are central also to women's food security and nutrition. We've heard that, to their economic empowerment and the resilience to the impact of climate change and environmental degradation, including drought and land degradation. We know that 37.2% of the world's females face a high or very high exposure to droughts. And droughts destroy agricultural yields, expose women and girls to food insecurity, to malnutrition, and in most catastrophic episodes, to famine, to starvation. Also, they lead to crisis, and we know that in crisis, women are subjected to gender-based violence and to violence against them in all shapes and forms. So this is also intrinsically related to their rights and to their dignity and also to their resilience. I think
I apologize for interrupting. Could I ask you to
sure.
come to your
And
point?
I think
Thank
what
you.
we need to, you said how we need to really affect policies. I think one of the important ways of affecting policies is to work on data and to work on disaggregated data so we understand what the issues are and how to tackle them, and also to ensure that, as I mentioned earlier, that evidence-based reasons are there for us to continue to work on ensuring that women's increased economic autonomy, their increased ownership of their land and security happens within the policies of the country itself, and having them at the table when these decisions are made and these policies are presented.
Madam Executive Director, thank you very much indeed. I apologise for interrupting. We're just against the clock. Thank you very much.
You were right to interrupt.
Okay. Now, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, it's known as the FAO. They've been working on helping countries to integrate responsible tenure of land when it comes to national laws, their policies and governance frameworks as well. And the Director General of the FAO has sent us a message, and this is Mr. Kyu Dong-yu.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, FAO pleased to co-organize this event together with the UNCCD, which provides an opportunity to discuss how to advance gender equality and land restoration goals in World Day to combat desertification and drought 2023. Restoring land is essential to reducing poverty and hunger. 95% of food is produced on land, 2 billion hectares of which is deteriorated worldwide. That's in fact 34% of world agricultural land due to the impact of the climate crisis and the ever-growing demand for food security. The UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration is an opportunity for farmers, governments, consumers, and other partners to scale up efforts to support the transformation of global agri-food systems to be more efficient, more inclusive, more resilient, and more sustainable, and to increase food security and improve the livelihood of millions of farmers, particularly for women in developing countries. The FAO report on the status of the women in agri-food systems sets out that the sub-Saharan Africa agri-food system accounts for 66% of women's employment. And in South Asia, 71% of women work in the agri-food systems. However, there are significant gender gaps. Women are more food insecure than men as consumers. Women found it's harder to access land, other resources, and services as producers. Women have less ownership of land than men. Ladies and gentlemen, to restore and growing fertile land, we need to grow equality. At FAO, we know that women are agents of change at the forefront of production, supply chain, and restoration. This is why FAO and the UNCCD produced a technical guidance to advance the implementation of the volunteer guidelines on the responsible governance of tenure of land, fisheries, and forestry in the context of national food security. This guide took us a step further to closing the gender tenure gap. To continue in this direction, we need first policy and legislation for women's meaningful participation in decision-making processes related to land at the national and local level. Second, to transform land administration systems access to the justice to make them gender responsive. And third, to work in partnership with the farmers, cross-government, civil society, academia, and the private sector. FAO has been working on a number of initiatives and projects to advance these actions. For example, FAO Action Against the Desertification in support of Africa Great Green Wall Initiative has provided a platform to empower rural women in land restoration over 100,000 hectares in the Sahara. Let us continue to work together to support more women are involved in land restoration and to promote the four betters: better protection, better nutrition, a better environment, a better life, leaving no one behind. I thank you.
Director General, thank you very much, of the FAO. Dr. Solange Bandiaki-Bandji, I'd like to turn to you. I know, and we all know, that money matters. But what I'd like to hear is two cases from you, because you do have them, and these are from Togo and Peru, when it comes to land degradation. I wonder if you could share those with us. We have about a minute and a half. I apologize.
I'll do my best. Thanks for the opportunity and also for this very timely conversation. As we've known, for today, our call to action is Her Land, Her Rights. And I must say it goes hand in hand with the global call to action for a gender-inclusive climate finance, because we need finance to advance land degradation and to meet the land restoration goals. And without indigenous and local community women access to funding, we will not achieve the global climate and development goals. And the reason why I'm saying this is that rural women, indigenous and community women, they play a key role in climate change adaptation and land restoration using their traditional knowledge. However, their role remains invisible and unfunded. So if you look at that, we can say that women, of course, are victims to drought, to desertification, but they are also the solutions. So it is very timely and important for government and donors to provide grassroots women direct, equitable, flexible, and long-term funding to ensure the legal recognition and protection of their land tenure rights.
So how has this been implemented in, for example, Togo?
Yeah, this is very important because there are existing mechanisms, for example. Last year at the COP27 in Egypt, 75 grassroots women's organizations came together and formed a global alliance called the Global Alliance for Land and Climate. And what they wanted is to demand direct access to funding, because women have been doing a lot on the ground. RRI, the Rights and Resource Initiative, is a global coalition, so we have local partners in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And what we have learned is that most of them are really doing activities related to land and forest restoration. They are also they're planting local tree species. Many of them also have goals to plant, for example, millions of trees by 2030. That needs to be recognized. They're using also agricultural crop and sustainable agricultural practices. All those best practices that are happening in the world. We cannot say, well, yes, women are not really there. They're there yet. They're doing the work. They need to have access to funding. So their work needs to be sustained, need to be funded. And again, as we're talking here, we're talking about like women's right to land. We're talking about all kinds of women, rural women, indigenous women, local community women, women from ethnic minorities, women, Afro-descendant women. And also we're talking about all lands and territories, meaning dry land, agricultural land, forested land, mangrove, seascape. So there's a lot happening on the ground. It's just let's make sure that women have direct access to funding so they can advocate for the protection of their rights to land, but also they can be really rewarded for the great work they're doing on the ground.
Dr. Solange, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Dr. Solange Bandiaki-Bandji, who is the President of the Rights and Awareness Group. And thank you also to Dr. Annelies Bloem and Ms. Sima Sami Bahous. Thank you. Thank you. And we'd like to hear from the audience. So in order to do that, I'd like to invite the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, Mr. Ibrahim Thiaw, to moderate some of this dialogue. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Lucreza, and it's very hard to take over from you, but indeed it is my honor to moderate this session. We are now going to the floor, so it's your turn to actually give us your statements, your views, and to share your knowledge and experience. I'm told we are limited by time, so if that's okay with everybody, I would like to propose that we limit the time speaking to 2 minutes for each delegation. Unless you represent a group, then in that case, I would propose we go for 5 minutes for if you are speaking on behalf of a group. I understand Trinidad and Tobago wants to have the floor. Is that, I'm not used to this system here. Trinidad and Tobago, am I right?
Yes, yes.
Yes, so I would like to give the floor to Trinidad and Tobago. I would like, first of all, to congratulate you on your election as incoming President of the General Assembly and to give you the floor. Thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you, Executive Secretary. My delegation is pleased to participate in this high-level event to mark Desertification and Drought Day 2023. And in tabling these remarks, permit me to congratulate the organizers for the very astute and appropriate way in which they have coupled the themes of gender equality and land restoration. Building on the theme of this year's Desertification and Drought Day, Her Land, Her Rights, we must urgently secure women's land rights so that they can protect and restore our rapidly degrading land. Drought, land degradation, and desertification are all becoming more frequent and are impacting women and girls first and worst. It is absolutely essential that as a first step, governments prioritize the elimination of legal barriers to women and girls' land ownership in order to ensure that women can lawfully inherit land. In addition, governments should better involve women in land management, conservation, and restoration programs. When such barriers are removed, women are able to make decisions on how to manage land, resulting in both improved soil health and agricultural yields. This, therefore, represents a strategic investment in food, water, and climate security, and in the future of our societies as a whole. No country or region is immune from drought and its impact on food, water, and energy security. We must change how the world tackles growing drought risks. Droughts are occurring more frequently and for longer duration, driven by climate change and also aggravated by widespread unsustainable land management practices. Building resilience to reduce the high human, social, and economic costs of drought, including loss of life and livelihoods, water and food insecurity, biodiversity loss, disruption in the energy, transportation, and tourism sectors, as well as forced migration, displacement, and conflicts over scarce natural resources. In response, the leaders of Senegal and Spain, together with 30 countries and more than 20 organizations, launched the International Drought Resilience Alliance in 2022. We must all be robust in our support of the work of the Alliance to accelerate a shift from the current approach of pursuing an emergency response to one that emphasizes instead building long-term drought resilience. Land restoration, therefore, is an urgent, worthwhile, and achievable goal to address multiple global challenges. Up to 40% of the world's land is degraded, which affects half of humanity. At the same time, global voluntary commitments to restore degraded land have reached 1 billion hectares by 2030. Almost half of these are pledged under the UNCCD. Now is the time to turn these commitments into real action, as doing so will contribute to the achievement of SDG 15.3 on land degradation neutrality, while generating significant economic, environment, and societal benefits across the globe, including strengthening global food systems on a sustainable basis. Thank you, Executive Secretary.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for your statement. Now I would like to give the floor to Chile, please.
Muchas gracias por conceder.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Chile believes that in order to avoid degradation and improve land quality with gender equality in the framework of land restoration requires integrated strategies that include the reduction of degradation, rehabilitation of degraded land, and recovery of deserted land. Additionally, we need to be cross-cutting in including a gender approach as a tool in order to improve women's conditions in land tenure, social development, and economic development as well. Against this backdrop, Chile is working on the issue of land restoration through programs and tools, one of which is focused on avoiding degradation and restoring native forests, improving our sustainable management, protecting conservation areas, improving and increasing forest coverage on a permanent basis. Some of these initiatives not only seek to include greater participation among women as a number of activities in the territories, but rather they focus on raising their role, considering their needs and opinions, and that way we all benefit directly. It's worth mentioning that gender equality, when it comes to the sustainable use of ecosystems and forests, particularly at the community level, has shown itself to have a massive impact on legal activities and groups' ability to manage conflict, conservation, and in generating resources in a sustainable fashion. Therefore, addressing a gender-based approach as an integral part of our programs and projects is both an obligation and also an opportunity to contribute to social justice. Full and cross-cutting integration of a gender approach in the project cycle is a fundamental pillar, and for that, gender analysis from the design and implementation phase, as well as monitoring projects, foments participation with votes and a voice to women and men, and that needs to lead not only to identifying existing gaps, but also come up with specific actions to respond to the differentiated needs that we have detected. Specifically, when it comes to defining Phase 3 of our national policy on climate change and vegetation resources, we have established guidelines, targets, and specific goals when it comes to implementing the safeguard of gender. This requires a differentiated analysis of impacts and risk in order to reduce more gaps in discrimination and adapt measures for both women and men through the implementation of a gender focus in our projects aimed at the root causes and differentiated impact in order to have greater sustainability in our territorial actions. Thus, within the distribution of benefits system in the face of climate change, gender variables are considered key in public policies as well as in diverse projects and additional points for initiatives drafted by women, as they are often the owners of the project or property. Land ownership is unequal in Chile when it comes to gender and the publication of projects. This is a major challenge to overcome, and we can state that giving greater points to women-led projects allows us to improve their access to benefits, where in the first cycle of public competitions for the distribution of resources involves almost 50% of the beneficiaries from the projects, which as women. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much for your statement. Now I would like to call on the distinguished representative of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Can I again just remind all distinguished delegates that we are really short in time, and I would like us to limit ourselves to the 2 minutes that have been set. Thank you. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. At the outset, I would like to thank the organizers of the meeting today in this day to combat desertification and drought, which concentrates on creating gender equality and land protection. My country believes that the women are an essential player in achieving social justice and development. Women have an incredible and essential role to achieve the ODD. The SDGs, and we need to increase her role in this regard. Mr. President, these challenges that are caused by desertification and drought are one of the biggest threats to humanity, and they affect greatly the biodiversity and the loss of biodiversity. And in terms of desertification, my country pays a great deal of affection to combating drought and desertification that is faced by several countries, especially in our Arabic region, where we have made a great deal of efforts in order to face these challenges in the Saudi Arabia and on the regional level, to increase cooperation and plant 50 billion trees in our region. Since we know the importance of biodiversity and strengthening biodiversity, in the G20, we have launched the initiative to stop desertification and drought. And lastly, Saudi Arabia looks forward to hosting the 16th Congress on fighting desertification and drought, and we hope to be able to assist in the fighting of desertification and drought all throughout the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your statement. Now I would like to call on the distinguished representative of Mexico. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mexico celebrates convening today as the International Day Against Desertification and Drought and Land Degradation, as these are vital topics for the multilateral agenda, and they require a gender perspective in order to address them. We also thank you for the valuable information presented by the panel through this dialogue. In Mexico, my country, 85% of the territory has one of the most intense droughts in the last decade. And this has an impact on women and girls, particularly in rural communities and indigenous communities. And the impact limits their access to land, as well as healthcare, education, water, and sanitation services. Therefore, we need solutions that allow us to combat these problems, while we also address social inequality. For that, integration of the 3 Rio Conventions on climate change, biodiversity, and desertification is crucial, as is the implementation of nature-based solutions with an ecosystem approach in which women and girls have active and full, equal, effective, and important participation. Rural and indigenous women are the holders of food security in many parts of both Mexico and the rest of the world. They are key in developing sustainable agriculture and agroforestry, as well as conservation and sustainable water management. Therefore, achieving gender equality and women's empowerment is fundamental to achieving sustainable management of natural resources and addressing the challenges related to desertification. Dear colleagues, in Mexico, we have many policies and programs with a gender policy to address the challenges I just described. Some of them include the National Program for Soil Restoration and Recovery of Agricultural Fishery Production and the Program for Forestry Development and the program Sowing the Seeds of Life. These programs foment forestry and agricultural techniques that are sustainable and avoid soil degradation, promote conservation of soil and ecosystem, reduce the drying of water sources, and mitigate carbon emissions, as well as promote food security for our population. Finally, Mexico reiterates the importance of promoting and ensuring active participation of women in decision-making processes at the local, national, regional, and international levels. We need women's leadership, their knowledge, and their resilience. Thank you.
I thank you for your statement. Now I would like to call on the distinguished representative of Uzbekistan.
Mr. Executive Secretary, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, let me commend the Secretariat of the UNCCD and UN Women for organizing this important event in commemoration of the World Day to Combat Desertification and Drought under the slogan, Her Land, Her Right, which is extremely relevant today given the fact that the women's empowerment, their leadership, can significantly improve our efforts towards the sustainable land management, particularly full achievement of SDG 15. Mr. Executive Secretary, over half of Uzbekistan territory is covered by desert. In my country is at the forefront of the challenges of the desertification and land degradation caused by the desiccation of once the fourth largest lake in the world, the Aral Sea, and its negative impact on the environment and the ecosystem of the region. In an effort to mitigate the impact of this ecological disaster to the livelihood of the local population, the government of Uzbekistan since 2018 has been carrying out an intensive afforestation campaign in the region. In November 2021, at the initiative of President Shavkat Mirziyoyev, an ambitious nationwide afforestation program, Yashil Makon Green Nation, was launched, where women are taking active part and leadership role. It envisages the planting of 1 billion trees and shrub saplings across the country over the next 5 years, increasing the green spaces in cities from the current 8 to 30%. Mr. Executive Secretary, land ownership and women's empowerment are important drivers of economic development, improvement of environmental well-being, as well as addressing the negative consequences of the climate change. Given these circumstances, in the renewed Constitution of Uzbekistan, following the two main principles were enshrined. First, the state is obliged to ensure equal rights and opportunities for women and men in public administration and all affairs of society. Second, land may be privately owned in a manner to ensure its rational and sustainable use, as well as to protect as a national wealth. These constitutional norms lay a strong legal foundation for equal and active participation and leadership of women in promoting the land restoration by owning and sustainably managing it for the sake of our people and planet. In conclusion, I would like to reaffirm Uzbekistan's strong commitment to the full implementation of the strategic objective of the United Nations Convention to combat desertification. In the ancient city of Samarkand, Uzbekistan will hold next 21st meeting of the Committee for the Renewal of the Implementation of the Convention. We invite all delegations to participate in it, and I would like to thank you for giving me the floor. Thank you, Mr. Executive Secretary.
Thank you very much for your statement. I see a list of countries and organizations that want to take the floor. We will have a second round after we go through our second panel. But before, Lukwesa, you take the floor, can I just give the floor to civil society organizations, the major group for children and youth, then back to you. Major group, please.
Hi, I'm Teresa from Portugal, and I'm honored to be speaking on behalf of the UNCCD Youth Caucus for the major group of children and youth. The Youth Caucus was operationalized in 2019 and is recognized by the Conference of Parties to the UNCCD. It serves as the youth engagement mechanism for the convention, and it includes hundreds of youth and youth groups from different regions all over the world. I have been so inspired by what has been said here today. It's clear that we need empowerment. Empowerment through education, communication, and participation. The solutions need to include a true participatory, inclusive solution design, include all and leave no one behind in gender-responsive, culture-sensitive measures. B, sustainability. Significant investments and sound planning for fast-paced but long-lasting solutions instead of performative actions. And C, clear communication and education, especially climate education, reaching all the stakeholders and, most importantly, women and the youth, those advocating for their own future. In 2 words, solutions can be found by raising voices. Real, sustainable solutions are possible and pertinent. The fight for our right to a future starts now. Thank you all so much.
Dr. Thiaw, thank you very much indeed, and thank you also from the voices from the floor. So we are going to move on to our second panel session, excuse me, and the hope is we hear further voices at the end of the session before we wrap up at around 1 o'clock. So hopefully you can understand why we are trying to gallop through things, but also hear from those important voices. So from policy to action is what we're going to be discussing shortly. To get to the heart of this discussion, we're going to hear first from the Administrator of the United Nations Development Programme, Mr. Ashim Steiner.
Executive Secretary of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, my dear friend and colleague Ibrahim Thiaw, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. As we mark this year's World Day to Combat Desertification and Drought, our planet's land continues to be degraded and destroyed. That includes unsustainable farming that depletes nutrients in the soil, or consider climate change that is leading to more frequent and harsher droughts, also damaging the land. Indeed, land degradation, desertification and drought represent a fatal partnership. That includes their role in the global hunger crisis. At present, over 800 million people worldwide are unsure of where their next meal might be coming from. It is also forcing people from their homes, and livelihoods are literally turning into sand. Yet there is a disproportionate effect on women and girls that we must also consider. For instance, land degradation tends to increase the burden of unpaid domestic work by forcing women to walk further or wait in long lines to collect water. An unacceptable number of women also face numerous other challenges, including barriers to land ownership or access to credit and agricultural technology. It means that they're unable to invest in key areas like soil conservation and tree planting. When they gain equal access to land, women and girls increase agricultural productivity, build resilience to droughts, and restore degraded land. And when they have control over their future, they invest more in nutrition, health, and education, driving down poverty and advancing progress across the global goals. To support UNCCD's vital work, the United Nations Development Programme is equipping women and girls with new tools to conserve and restore our precious land. To take just one example, that includes Eritrea, where land restoration is being driven by more secure land tenure, and I recently visited this program myself. It is leading to more trees and more productivity, including more food for farmers and households, already benefiting some 10,000 families and conserving that vital asset, soils. Of all the gender inequalities, the imbalance in women's access to fertile land remains one of the most damaging. Women and girls, half of the world's population, must be able to play their part in nurturing rich and healthy soils, the basis for all life on Earth. Her land and her rights matter like never before. Thank you.
Mr. Achim Steiner, thank you very much indeed. So let's move on to our second policy discussion. No, it's action actually. Panel discussion on action. So I'd like to invite our distinguished speakers, very excited because we've also got some land heroes joining us today. We have Monsieur Alain Richard Donwahi, who is the president of the 15th Conference of the Parties of the UNCCD. We've also got Ms. Kekeshan Basu, who is the founder-president of Green Hope Foundation and a UNCCD land hero, and Ms. Rex Molapo, who is the co-founder of Conservation Music based in Lesotho, that beautiful kingdom landlocked within South Africa. Thank you and welcome. Welcome to the stage. We are going to start off with the president of the 15th Conference of the UNCCD. We met last year in Abidjan, in Côte d'Ivoire. Beautiful weather, beautiful discussions that were had.
We're waiting for you there.
But what came out of it? What were the actions from what was discussed in Côte d'Ivoire? I wonder if you could summarize that for us.
Yeah, I have not a lot of time to do so, but what I wanted to say is that during that COP in Abidjan, we had three main declarations that were done at three different levels. First, during the Head of State Summit, where we had more than 15 head of states and representative of states in Abidjan, there was a declaration called the Abidjan Call. The Abidjan Call was around many subjects, and especially on the subject of land tenure by the women and the implication of the women and the youth in the designing and implementation of policies. The second declaration was made by the women, by first ladies. First ladies in the gender caucus in Abidjan had a meeting and a declaration called the Abidjan Declaration. And it was around the implication of women, of course, in the restoration of land and the preservation of land, and also the fight against drought. The third declaration was made by the convention itself, by the delegates. It was life, land, and legacy. It was also an advocacy and highlighting the need of including women, the youth, girls, in the designing and the application of the policies around the restoration of land and drought. So that meant the implication of all levels of responsibility, not only the head of states, but also the women at the highest level, and implication of the youth also was made. So there was a big advocacy for transforming in each locally the laws and the regulations to ensure land ownership by the women, to help reverse the degradation of land and make sure that equality of gender is helpful for sustainable land restoration.
Were you happy with what was achieved? Sorry, I'm going to press you here. Were you happy with what was achieved?
Yes, yes. What was achieved was good, but I think there has to be more implication, more action, more implication and more action. Less talk. Of course, we need awareness, everyone's awareness, not only by the head of states, but also by the people, the communities themselves. And you cannot have things move if you don't address the communities themselves, if you don't ask the community to be part of it. So I was glad in Abidjan to see the organization, the civil organization, and the youth, especially the youth, being more implicated in the designing, in the solutions to bring, to that COP.
Okay, well, obviously, you know who we have on stage with us. We have the youth with us. They have been doing the work that you have been describing. It's an absolute honor to have two remarkable young women on the stage. Rex Molapo from Lesotho flew in yesterday, late hours, so fantastic that you've managed to stay with us for today. And also Ms. Kekasan Basu, who is from Kekasha, that's it, silent N. I was schooled on this, from Canada. Just before I ask you about your case studies, you've heard what Mr. Dunwahi has had to say. He is up there, he's in the seat of power, he's partly guiding policy, he's been involved in that. What are your reflections on what you've heard? Rex, could you take that away, please?
Thank you so much for this platform. And I'm really happy, as you mentioned, that the UNCCD is giving youth a platform to speak up. I think for me, the biggest thing really with regards to policies that are made has to do with ensuring that the messages that are up high there also are able to connect with the grassroots communities and the people on the ground, because sometimes I feel like there's a bit of a disconnect in terms of the decisions that are being made at high level and then the connection or the relevance of them with the people on the ground, or even their awareness about these policies that are made that directly affect them. So for me, that's one of the big issues that I really love to advocate for, to say, let's ensure that people at the grassroots level relate to these high-level policies and decisions that are made.
Kekasha, do you feel listened to? We heard them, Mr. Dunwani said it's important to engage the youth. Have you been heard?
Well, I think that there's still a long way to go in ensuring that every single person is heard. And as young people, what often happens is that we are looked at as a homogenous entity where our diversity is completely ignored. And as young women, our unique intersectionalities and lived experiences are further ignored. So it's extremely important to recognize just how we as human beings have our unique lived experiences, have unique challenges, and therefore we need unique solutions, localized solutions, to actually be able to solve all of the unique challenges that we face. And as young people and as young women, we're no different. So policies need to take that, those unique intersectionalities into account, for sure.
Rex, sorry, I've taken a little bit of privilege here. Lesotho, what experience have you had when it comes to, what's the state of land rights for women in Lesotho, and what experience have you had? And I understand that you use music.
Yes, great. Yes, through my organization, we leverage the power of music to promote environmental education. So, but just to answer your question about what is my lived experience, what's the situation in Lesotho. Even though Lesotho has made a lot of progress, really has made progress. I think the Land Act of 2010 was enacted, but there's still challenges on the ground. And I say this because I've been directly affected by this issue. And that's why today's topic is very important to me, like her land, her rights, because as much as the laws, there are good laws that are being created, the enforcement mechanisms are still a bit lacking there, because in my case, as much as we have the Land Act and some amendments have been made to it, women still do not have access to these land rights. Which is the case for me, because then we're still affected by the old primitive customary laws that prevented the girl child from inheriting land from their family, especially when they have an older sibling who happens to be male. So every other inheritance would be given to them.
How does that make you feel, Rex? How does that make you feel?
It's sad. It's sad, and it says to me there's a need for robust action to be taken in ensuring that these laws are enforced, not just to be excited and happy that, oh, we enacted a certain law, we put it in place, we made certain amendments, which goes back to my earlier point to say, yes, there are high-level decisions that are being made, but what is the actual impact on the ground, on the people? So I believe that those are some of the actions that really need to be taken, and also for women to be educated further on how they can access their land rights, what actions they can take to access their land rights, even in cases where their home countries have enacted such laws, which I still feel is still a bit lacking in this regard, in that regard. So, yeah.
Okay. Kekesha, I wonder if I could turn to you now. Obviously, you're based in Canada. What's your experience in Canada, and what exactly, in terms of activism, do you do on this? Do you carry out on this matter?
Absolutely. Well, I think, first of all, it's really important to note that climate change and climate change-induced land degradation and drought are no longer something that's just really far away. It's something that we all face and something we definitely face in Canada. And as an organization, for us, working across 28 countries in some of the world's most marginalized communities with over 500,000 people, every single year we're witness to the debilitating impacts of climate change-induced drought and the consequent land degradation that's quite literally pushing entire communities, and within them, their women and girls, into this ever-deepening mire of poverty and exploitation. So two such communities that we actually work in are in the Sundarbans, which is the world's largest mangrove forest straddling eastern India and Bangladesh, and in the mangroves along the Atlantic coastline of Liberia, where climate change-induced tropical storms and the increased salinity are actually rendering millions of acres of land as untenable, and that has an exacerbated impact on the women and girls. So through our mass mangrove restoration programs for restoring this land that actually begin with educating the women and girls on their land rights, because with that education, they have the knowledge and power to take action, we are ensuring that they have access to their rights, they have autonomy not only over themselves, but over their land as well. We see reduced instances of domestic violence, of child marriages, we see reduced soil erosion, and that in turn leads to greater food security, biodiversity conservation, more sustainable usage of land, and that in turn creates healthier and more resilient societies. So essentially, by advancing these women's land rights, we are making sure that the women and girls go from victim to changemaker.
Kekesha, just to pick up on this, because some people would say it's almost as if you're implying that women manage the land better than men. Is there a clarification here?
Well, in the communities that we work in, it's almost always women who've been the traditional bearers of knowledge of the land, what for the food, water, climate nexus, and they have been the ones who've possessed this knowledge for generations. But because of archaic gender-based practices that exclude women and girls from decision-making processes, this knowledge is just forgotten. It is pushed to the side. And so women and girls are involved in the decision-making processes when it comes to land management, and their land rights are taken away. So absolutely, women and girls working in the communities that we've seen, when they are managing the land, and not just managing the land, being at one with the land, it's just so much better, not only for the environment, but for the society and for the economy as well.
Mr. Damwani, I am going to come back to you to finish off our session in a moment. But Rex, very quickly, I said you use music to educate women about their land rights. Now, you have a certain musician here who's sitting in the corner against there, Mr. Ricky Kedge. Have you come across him before in Lesotho? And what was his impact on you? Why are you using music?
I came across Ricky Kedge somewhere in Nairobi, Kenya, I think years ago. And we had a conversation with him, which I hope we can still continue to have and see how we can collaborate best in terms of using music. Because I believe in the power of music in terms of how it's able to convey complex topics in much easier and digestible ways, and then how it's also very inclusive, allowing different parties of society to participate in important issues like the ones we're discussing today. So music has that power to break down complex topics. So I haven't seen him in Lesotho, but I was inspired to start using music because of my colleagues that I met a few years ago who were then using combining that passion for music and environmental science. And obviously issues of desertification, drought are part of that. And Lesotho has huge challenges of soil erosion also. And those are some of the topics that we also cover in our activism and in the music that we're using. And also empowering the communities that are directly affected by environmental and land degradation through music. So that's how we've been doing it. And I was inspired to start working with them because of my realization of the power of music and of course my background as a singer myself. So yes.
Thank you for that. So just to finish off, Mr. Donwahi, 2 questions. You can choose which one you'd like to answer. The first off, what is the state of women's land rights in your country? That's your first option. The second one, is there anything you've heard today that you would perhaps say, do you know what, I think we need to do this to push the issue in the right direction? You choose. What would you like to answer?
I'd like to answer to the second one.
Okay.
The second question, because when I'm listening to those 2 young ladies here and listening to what they are saying, I'm optimistic that in a few years there will be more equity in land tenure for women. But I'm also optimistic in that we are going to be able to change things finally. What I wanted to advise to those young ladies is to go also into politics, because decision makers are politicians most of the time. And politicians are mainly men, not enough women. And you have to use women in politics, in parliament, in government, to make things change, really. And it's possible. In all the countries, most of the time, it's 50-50, women and men. In a lot of countries, you have more women than men. So make your voice heard. It's possible. And with the youth, I think it's possible. So congratulations.
So Rex, Kekesha, you heard it there. They're making room for us at the table. Fantastic. Mr. Donwahi, thank you so much. And Rex as well, and Kekesha, thank you for your time. And that is the end of this second panel session. Again, I am going to throw it to the audience, and it is Mr. Thiaw who will be taking statements from the audience. Thank you very much. We're going to take a picture. Mr. Thiaw, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lukweza, and thank you for the stellar way in which you moderated both sessions and since this morning. So thank you very much for your contribution. Now we have a list of speakers. We are very happy to have a long list, and I hope to be able to give the floor to everybody. But we are limited by time, as you know, and we have 20 minutes for this session. So from my list, I have first Pakistan, and I would like to recognize Pakistan and give them the floor, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the outset, let me thank the panelists for the insightful discussion. By launching the campaign Her Land and focusing on women's land rights, the UNCCD has drawn world's attention towards gender equality. Gender equality is vital to cope with the impacts of climate change, drought, and desertification. Today, land degradation impacts nearly half of the world's population, in particular the women. Globally, around 37% of the world's female population faces a high exposure to droughts. Women's land rights are one of the major drivers of economic autonomy and decision-making. Women living in rural areas consist of more than a quarter of the world's total population, and nearly half of the global agricultural workforce is female, but less than 1 in 5 landholders in the world are women, leaving limited room for their economic prosperity and making them more vulnerable to poverty. Mr. Chair, in my country, there is growing awareness about the women's rights, including their land rights. To this end, Pakistan enacted anti-women practices law in 2011 to promote gender equality. This law seeks to protect women's rights to inherit property, among other rights. In the end, in order to address challenges posed by climate change, including desertification and droughts, my delegation would like to recommend the following. Number 1, enacting gender-responsive reforms, laws, and policies worldwide to address discrimination against women. Second, increasing women participation in the parliaments to enhance their decision-making powers. This can be done by fixing quotas for women parliamentarians. Third, launching campaigns on mainstream and social media to create responsiveness about women land rights. Fourth, enhancing women's access to knowledge and education in order to make them aware about their land rights. Finally, capacity building of the public and private sector institutions to uphold women land rights. Mr. Chair, we hope that this event will contribute to raise awareness on the significance of protecting women land rights. I thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement. It is my honor now to recognize the distinguished representative of Senegal.
Merci. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to congratulate the members of the panel for their very relevant remarks, but please allow me also to congratulate my compatriot who is not anymore, the megastar Baaba Maal, who, with our sister Modja, was designated a Goodwill Ambassador for the UNCCD. His work to protect the environment in general and art in particular is well known, but it could never been otherwise because he's from a region where the life is organized on the basis of nature in relation to nature. That being said, I would like to remind you, Chair, that since 1964, Senegal, which has ratified the UNCCD in July 1995, guarantees through the law related to the nature guarantees access to for all citizens. It eliminated legal barriers that prevented women having access to land, even though they contribute up to 80% of transformation activities in the and 70% of informal activity. In Africa, most of women who own land don't have a sufficient competency to allow them to be secure and to implement their skills, and therefore the policies for giving access to land for women should include the strengthening of their technical ability, their better access to the market, the strengthening of their leadership and access to decision-making bodies so that their needs and voices are heard. The promotion of female entrepreneurship is important too for my delegation. Securing the access to land is important, will allow to work on the degradation of land and the droughts and all the effect of climate change. It is in that regard that the Senegal and Spain have launched in the margin of COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh the International Alliance for the Resilience when facing drought. It has 32 countries and 23 organizations to contribute significantly to the international efforts against the growing threat of droughts throughout the world. I would like in conclusion to reiterate here the invitation that we launched to other states who are not yet part of the alliance to become part of it without further ado. Thank you very much for your attention.
La parole est maintenant à l'honorable délégué du Kenya.
I would like to now give the floor to the honorable delegate of Kenya.
I thank you, Chairman. As we celebrate the Desertification and Drought Day, the theme of this event speaks to the urgent need to empower women, recognize their land rights, and foster their leadership in decision-making processes related to land management. Access to land and secure land rights are fundamental elements of gender equality and sustainable development. In many parts of the world, women continue to face significant barriers in asserting their land rights and participating in land management processes. Kenya has implemented policies and programs to increase women's access to land and integrate gender perspectives into land restoration strategies. For instance, the Constitution of Kenya provides a strong legal framework for protecting women land rights. This has been reinforced through policies such as the National Land Policy and Land Registration Act, the Community Land Act, which requires equal representation of women in community land management structures and safeguards their rights to access, use, and control community land. Other policies include affirmative action measures to preferentially award 30% of government ministry tenders to women-owned businesses in different sectors, including agriculture. Additionally, Kenya's land ministry has digitalized land records to enhance security of land rights. We have also introduced land clinics and land digitization awareness campaigns targeting women and marginalized groups. Kenya women have also taken advantage of rallying together under cooperative societies and savings and credits organizations to pool resources and purchase land and support livelihoods. Excellencies, Mr. Chair, to advance these goals, we would like to recommend the following. First, we must review and revise legal frameworks to remove discriminatory provisions and ensure that they safeguard women's land rights. Second, we must promote awareness campaigns to educate women about their rights, including land rights, and provide them with the tools to assert and protect these rights. Third, it is imperative to foster women and youth leadership and decision-making power in all areas, including sustainable and land management. Fourth, utilizing data, technology, and innovation to promote women's land rights and enhance their participation, as well as ensure equitable access to land-related information and resources. Fifth and last, we must leverage on local and traditional knowledge and practices to support women's land rights, role in land productivity, restoration, and ownership. In conclusion, Mr. Chair, Kenya reiterates its commitment to advance women's rights and the promotion of stronger women leadership and decision-making power in sustainable land management. I thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement. I had difficulties in interrupting Kenya for obvious reasons. It's my second country, but also a female speaker, which was really a hard decision for me to make. But from now on, I have to be more strict on managing the time. So the next speaker is El Salvador.
Thank you to the moderator. Thank you very much for organizing this event, as well as the contribution of the panelists in reiterating the value contribution of women in fighting desertification and droughts, particularly against a backdrop in which the impacts of climate change have a increasingly greater intensity and frequency, more immediately on vulnerable populations, including women who live in rural areas, indigenous women, and all of those who depend on agriculture and livestock as a livelihood. As a country that is located in the dry corridor of Central America, one of the most vulnerable regions to climate change on Earth, which is going through transformations in order to improve land productivity, in order to achieve food security and nutrition, we would like to underscore the importance of redoubling our efforts in order to implement activities and policies that promote women's participation and significant inclusion. We'd like to underscore the plan of gender action as a support to the implementation of the UN Convention for the Fight Against Desertification. Therefore, we recognize the importance of ensuring the relevant role of women, particularly in line with the cross-cutting nature of these topics that we have been discussing recently when it comes to reducing disaster risk and driving the responsible use of forest and water resources. This contributes to developing plans and programs focused on land restoration in a sustainable fashion, comprehensive and holistically. El Salvador is driving various initiatives in this area, such as the Mother Earth Project, the Coalition of Women in Climate Change. We also have the program Women in Agriculture, among others. In order to ensure that we develop these best practices and sustain them throughout the future, we need support in building infrastructure, technology, among other very important components. And to conclude, when it comes to the topics addressed in the panels, we'd like to highlight that it is key that we achieve resilience and drive even more programs and sustainable projects that involve women in land restoration. We need to consider the challenges of each country, such as El Salvador, where we face the impact of climate change constantly, and that includes droughts and flooding, which are increasingly prolonged and intense. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement. Now it is my honor to give the floor to the distinguished representative of Algeria.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, Excellencies and colleagues. A second, because I'm sorry, my laptop turned off. Just to use my phone. Sorry. Yeah. So at the outset, I would like to thank you for organizing this timely meeting in observance of the World Day to combat desertification and drought. I would like also to thank all distinguished panelists for their insightful intervention. Mr. Chairman, desertification, climate change, biodiversity loss, and environmental degradation have harshly impacted development gains achieved by developing countries, especially from Africa. While desertification is not a new phenomenon, it is happening at approximately 30 times the historical rate. In this regard, we reiterate the call for increasing the support to developing countries to enable them to build resilience and adapt and mitigate the effects of desertification through the transfer of technology and the provision of funds oriented to addressing desertification, land degradation, and drought, particularly in support of the national efforts of affected countries. Algeria, where desert covers 84% of its territory, attaches great importance to fight against desertification. Indeed, Algeria has set an ambitious plan and initiated national innovative mechanism to fight desertification, including the Green Dam, the Green Belt, throughout the advance of desertification. Furthermore, Algeria has developed numerous projects and regionally projects where women is an integral part of the effort to mitigate the impact of climate change and desertification. The recent call to set up an African Fund for Climate Change Disaster, as well as the establishment of an African civil mechanism to deal with natural disasters, as proposed by President Tebboune, were the perfect examples of the commitment and solidarity of Algeria with other developing countries to achieve SDG 13 by 2030. Let me conclude, Mr. Chair, by reaffirming Algeria's full support to the efforts of the international community to fight desertification and reiterate its commitment to share with developing countries experience and best practices in the field. I thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm sorry to put pressure on you, and I know it is difficult, but I appreciate your collaboration. Next on my list is Bolivia.
Thank you to the Executive Secretary. At the outset, my delegation would like to thank both all the organizers for this event. It's very timely and pertinent as we see the intersection between gender equality and land rights. Also, thank you to the various panelists for sharing your perspectives. Your Excellencies, in the face of a multidimensional climate crisis, we need to face hand in hand with justice in spirit. Land rights and those of indigenous women is not an aspiration. It is a priority for the plurinational state of Bolivia. In the face of our legislation, we have managed to make great strides in ensuring gender equality and access to control, as well as use of natural resources and land. And thanks to the justice and change policy in my country, we have been able to ensure that land ownership by women is over 40%. They were previously just 10% of landowners in 2006. This is a result of redistribution policies to address historic inequalities. The advancement continues to be consolidated through various development programs, technical assistance, and financial support. These activities recognize and value women's knowledge, and particularly those of rural and indigenous women when it comes to the interconnection between land and territory, culture, and gender. In the framework of decolonization and depatriarchization, we have been working to promote indigenous women in particular, and this is indispensable for restoring harmony with Mother Earth. With the leadership of women in agriculture and management of natural resources, we've been able to promote life system preservation and sustainability. We have also been able to ensure the quality of life of rural and indigenous communities. We reiterate our commitment to gender equality at every level and also our will to exchange experiences and solutions at the structural level in order to fight the climate change, drought, desertification, as well as desertification as a foundation for promoting the rights of the Mother Earth and the well-being of current and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now on my list is the distinguished representative of Nepal.
Thank you, Chair. Executive Director of UN Women, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege for me to address this event on behalf of the 46 LDCs. The LDCs are among the nations that are the most vulnerable to environmental and economic shocks and are especially exposed to drought, desertification, and adverse impacts of climate change. While the least developed countries in sub-Saharan Africa are particularly at risk, with farmers and rural populations on the front lines, it is also increasing in the South and Southeast Asian LDCs, where changes in precipitation can have significant impacts. The agricultural sector is of particular importance for LDCs. For example, in half of the LDCs, agriculture provides more than 50% of total jobs, and so much so, agriculture provides over 80% of employment in a number of LDCs. Furthermore, LDCs are also highly commodity dependent, often reliant on only few crops, yet many are net food importers. And women play a critical role in the sustainable land management. They comprise a significant proportion of the agriculture workforce and are also the custodian of traditional and local knowledge on sustainable practices. Yet, there are numerous obstacles to empowering women to make the right decisions, starting with land ownership. For this reason, we welcome the theme of this year's Desertification and Drought Day on Her Land, Her Rights, Advancing Gender Equality and Land Restoration Goals. Placing the focus on advancing women's land rights, leadership and decision-making power is central to better land management, especially at local level. We also call for full implementation of commitments under the UN Conventions to combat desertification and Paris Agreement on climate change and their respective COPs, including gender-related decisions. The LDCs will make every possible effort to ensure women's full, equal, meaningful, and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership at all levels of decision-making in political, cultural, and economic and public life. The Doha Program of Action also commits to ensuring improved access to land and protection for property rights and land rights, which is so critical to the economic empowerment of women in LDCs. Finally, Chair, we encourage all the stakeholders to implement the recently adopted Doha Program of Action for the least developed countries. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for your statement on behalf of the LDCs. It is now my honor to recognize the distinguished delegates from Côte d'Ivoire.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, tenu de ce panel, marquant la journée.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My delegation is saluting this panel under the theme Land, Her Rights, and the objective of soil restoration. I don't think Mr. Alain Richard Donwaye, President of COP15 here, and his commitment and his leadership to move forward these key issues. I would like to salute my fellow countrymen of hope and of leadership, and there is a lead. COP15 will be successful under his mandate. I would like to thank the various panelists for the quality of their interventions and their rich experience. My delegation would like note with concern that major challenges are still existing to mainstream the women and girls in this process, so as to end discrimination against women in terms of access and control management of land and other resources. So Côte d'Ivoire is committed in researching a solution against soil degradation and mitigating climate change effects. And since 1998, a law was passed to be also modified in October 2019. This is a legal provision granting women the right to benefit from right of land tenure document. So through facilitating their access to land, and we organized in May 2022 under the leadership of Madame Dominique Ouattara, who is First Lady of Côte d'Ivoire, promoting gender equality, in the sideline of the COP 15. This meeting gathering enabled many financial partners, technical donors to meet and to launch what we call Initiative d'Abidjan. The Abidjan Initiative makes Côte d'Ivoire to implement the COP15 resolutions, and where women are playing a key role. In 2022, with the support from the USAID, government of Côte d'Ivoire, with the support from the US government, to support this, the AFPF project coming to support the fourth pillar of the PND, which is the National Development Plan for Côte d'Ivoire, strengthening, mainstreaming, and inclusion for national solidarity. In conclusion, I would like to say the rights of women is key for their economic empowerment and for sustainable development, for rural development as well. So we need to change the paradigm and changing the relationship between women and land, and adapting our legal frameworks, our legal papers, so as to adopt transformative reforms for gender equality.
Recognize the distinguished delegates from Colombia.
Thank you very much, Executive Secretary. I would like to start by celebrating the decision to focus this event on gender equality. Women and girls suffer the adverse impacts of climate change, but at the same time, we are agents of change and fundamental transformation to move forward in towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Many studies have shown that when women's rights towards ownership and administration of land are respected, there are better results in terms of social and economic benefits for families and communities alike. The economic development and social sustainability and environmental sustainability can no longer be assumed as independent processes. From my trajectory as an indigenous woman, from the struggle that we have had to defend our territory and our culture, I can tell you that women from the rural backgrounds, not only indigenous women, but also peasants, we are caretakers of the land because of our connection to the land, to the territory. However, women possess less than 20% of the land, and in many countries, they still have discriminatory regulations that prevent them from having access to the land. Conservation and preservation of the land and the ecosystems need to include this transformative and gender-based perspective. And since we are aware of this, Colombia has recently launched an action plan for gender and climate change in order to empower women as peacemakers, as guardians of water and defenders of life. We invite all of you to work together so that we can ensure the empowerment of women and girls in all their diversities as a cross-cutting objective toward by highlighting that the full implementation of the 2030 agenda will not be possible as long as we leave half of the planet population behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your statement. I now would like to call on the representative of the Nature Conservancy.
Mr. Executive Secretary, Your Excellencies, my name is Sashwati Bora and I'm honored to be here representing the Nature Conservancy, a global environmental NGO here before you on the ancestral homelands of the Lenape people. At the Nature Conservancy, we recognize that tackling the many planet-sized challenges before us cannot be done without simultaneously addressing the gender gap. In part, that means finally recognizing the disproportionate impact that desertification, land degradation, and drought have on women and girls around the world. While women unevenly bear the impacts of climate change and water scarcity, we also know they can be a powerful part of the solution if only they're given the opportunity. It is well documented that when women have secure land rights, they are able to improve their incomes, food supplies for their families, and the health of the lands they manage. As the world looks for solutions to increase water scarcity, food insecurity, climate change, and biodiversity loss, we must ensure more women have a proper seat at the table. The Nature Conservancy has a proud history of supporting work around the world that advances women's lands rights. Like in northern Tanzania, where we have supported community members in securing official title to more than 1 million acres of traditional homelands, including Maasai women like Leah Ornwas, who almost lost her land after her husband's death because she was not educated about her rights. And yet, we know there is so much more that we can do as an organization and as part of a wider movement to advance women's land rights, starting with acknowledging our past and current mistakes and more actively addressing gender in our work. On behalf of our CEO, Jennifer Morris, and our entire organization, we will bring this focus to our work with UNCCD and the recently launched International Drought Resilience Alliance that we are proud to support. Drought resilience requires gender-responsive approaches in policymaking and programming to better include women in drought risk mitigation initiatives, and we are committed to do our part to advance this critical mission. Thank you very much.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are just about to draw to a close on the Drought and Desertification Day, and also her land as well. I found it absolutely fascinating, but to bring things to a close, I am going to invite the UN Women Executive Director, Ms. Simi Bahous, who is going to lead us through the closing segment of our event. And to bring everything to a resounding close, we are going to end on a musical note from our UNCCD Goodwill Ambassadors as well. They are sitting to the side and they will take to the stage to close today's event. To get us there, though, please can I be joined by Ms. Simi Bahous.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. This has been a truly inspiring event. We really have heard from so many whose perspectives must inform our urgent next steps. I thank you all for today's rigorous focus on the importance of women's land rights. Today and every day, we must continue this drive to make her land, her rights, a reality for women globally, in the name of land justice and gender equality. I reiterate my gratitude to the UNCCD Secretariat under the leadership the able leadership of my colleague Ibrahim Thiaw for upholding women's and girls' land rights as the center to the achievement of gender equality and women's empowerment. We stand firmly by your side, my friend. And I thank and recognize the invaluable contributions of my colleagues from FAO, OHCHR, and UNDP, together with the essential expertise and knowledge of the leaders here today from civil society and indigenous peoples, and all those representing women's organizations, youth, and other stakeholders in these critical issues. We have fundamental, even sacred connections as human beings to the lands on which we live. The rights of women and girls to a full and equal share of both the responsibilities for those lands and of their assets, of shelter, of security, of productivity, of life itself, is our firm shared belief and the inspiration for our determined collective efforts to implement these goals. We must all collectively galvanize and advance an ambitious women's and rights agenda. And we must also all collectively advance an ambitious women's land rights agenda. I urge you all to move beyond this campaign, Her Land, Her Rights, to make this campaign a call for action from all of us to ensure the objectives of this campaign. And I thank
you all on the floor for joining us today. We're going to be treated to the highlights, one of the highlights of this event, and that is our UNCCD Goodwill Ambassadors. I'd just like to say very quickly a huge thank you and congratulations to all the UNCCD team. They have worked tirelessly to get today's event ready for you. So congratulations. I have various members sitting to the side here, but they've worked so hard. The logistics have been incredible. And again, Mr. Thiaw for leading them as well. So from myself, I'd just like to say thank you for inviting me here. And I am going to hand the stage over to our musicians for today, our UNCCD Goodwill Ambassadors, and they are going to be performing the land anthem, Ina, Baaba, and Ricky.
Take it away.
So, Lonnie, this is the official UNCCD land anthem. Lonnie, why don't you teach everybody the song? Come on.
Well, we can't do this one without your help.
We need your help.
All y'all. So, we're going to keep it simple, though, right?
That's right. As the ambassador of Brooklyn.
There's our part and there's your part. Your part is simply, whoa. You got it?
No,
Perfect.
no.
We're going to make them sing it, though, right?
No. Your part over here is, oh!
And not bad. Whoa!
Oh!
Whoa! Okay, so the way it's going to go is I'm going to sing, let's celebrate the joy of life. Whoa! That's how it's going to work right there.
All right, I think that's how it goes.
All right, let's do this, Ricky. This is your land anthem.
Everybody needs to understand that everything under the sun's born from the land. You and me, we could be undefeated, it could be for a better plan. Let's go!
We all want to know we'll always have a home, a solid ground beneath our feet. The earth we walk upon and build our homes upon, she can provide our every need. But we need to stop and look around and marvel at all its beauty. Let's celebrate the joy of life. Whoa.
Yeah.
We're born from the land.
Come on, we born from the land.
Whoa.
Come on.
You and I Let's celebrate the joy of life. We're born from the land. You and I and all our life. We're born from the land.
Come on, everybody, come on. Yeah. Come on, put your hands up. Everybody, come on, clap your hands. Let's go. Come on, clap your hands. What's up? Come on, clap your hands. Come on, clap your hands. Everybody, let's clap your hands. Let's go. Come on, clap your hands. Somebody make some noise.
Can't you see that everything we need is right in the ground beneath our feet? And when will we see that life can only be as good as the home we keep? This home beneath our feet.
Come on.
Let's celebrate the joy of life.
Come on.
Born from the land.
Let's go. Hey.
You and I and all our life. We're born from the land. Yes, we are. Let's celebrate the joy of life. We're born from the land. Everybody, you and I and all of life.
Selfie time.
We're born from the land. We're born from the land.
Make some noise.
Everyone, Baaba Maal, big round of applause for him. Ira Modja, Lonnie Park on vocals, and Keith Middleton, Nate on sound, and Rishabh on video. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day.